As One Piece has continued to roll on and we've gotten more episodes, we've now come to realize the full extent of Jewerly Bonney's history and her potential future in One Piece. Bonney, like many of the supernovas, was kept in a relative secrecy for a lot of the series, but much like many of them now, she actually has her full origin on display, and honestly, it kind of shows her importance in the show at large. But there are a few things that some people might have missed, and some information that we can extrapolate to predict what might happen with her in the future, as well as what might have actually happened in the past. First off, let's be clear, I'm so finally glad we get to talk about the fact with the anime onlys that Bonney is not Kuma's biological daughter, but is his daughter in the most important ways. But it did leave some lingering questions that some One Piece fans might have picked up on, the chiefest of which is who's Bonnie's biological father? And it's entirely possible that we might never know about this, given that, there's a propensity for sometimes introducing characters that just don't have their original family around them. But it's also worth noting that as One Piece has gone on, we do usually tend to get answers even if the parents are just deceased or chose to abandon the child. There is a reoccurring element to this that I think we can pick up in Bonnie's story. So who is Bonnie's family? I use that with heavy asterisks. Well, we know that her mother was taken by a celestial dragon, and it's not made abundantly clear if the one that took her was the one that was interested in her or not. We just know that a celestial dragon was. But I would infer that the person who did take her was not a marine, but was in fact a celestial dragon, because the tone of the conversation and the information given suggests that. Which automatically right away does start tipping us off to the fact of who this might be. And yeah, this theory's been pretty prominent now for a while. Even Grand Line Review has covered it. But yeah, it seems more than likely that Figurlin Garling is Bonnie's father. Although there is some potential to the fact that Shamrock might be actually it. The main source of this theory kind of tends to come down to the fact of the timing that was involved, the age that Bonnie actually is, and the ultimately very weird detail that a celestial dragon was interested in her at all. Don't get me wrong, Ginny was incredibly attractive, but it would still be considered strange for a celestial dragon that happened to fixate on somebody from the lower world for any stretch of time. Usually it's like on a whim thing that they do it. But in this context, it seems to be suggesting that this person was actually on the lower world and actually saw her and took her because of that interest. And even with that statement, how many celestial dragons do you realistically see going down to the lower world? We get to see more with the rabbit hunt, but that's kind of an isolated event. Otherwise, usually they're visiting Isaba Odi Archipelago. They do also on occasion do world tours, but it's made abundantly clear in the flashback that Ginny is in a war-torn country, so that seems unlikely. This suggests that the dragon that was around there was a warrior, more than likely pinning them in the Celestial Knights. Now, the God Knights, even to manga readers, are still fairly obscure. I mean, we only know a couple of them, and their power is strong, but not fully established yet. However, I can't really think of a reason that one would necessarily be deployed to defend an island. So again, this does point to the fact that this particular dragon was there for Ginny. So what's the main underlying cause that this could potentially be either Figurlin Garling or Shamrock? Well, it kind of boils down to two potential ideas of why they might have been interested in Ginny. One is that Figurlin Garling wanted her to essentially replace the son that he lost in Shanks, and he was going to get that back no matter what, and that is just so incredibly gross, but honestly very fitting within the behavior that we've seen of celestial dragons. Even in a way potentially holding Ginny accountable, because she is technically the one that kicked off God Valley by leaking about the devil fruits, the events that ultimately led to Shanks being taken. Although I guess the more accurate term might be rescued, given all things. The second is the fact that if we compare ages, Shamrock and Shanks themselves would have been maybe a little younger. I mean, it's a bit difficult to say. We don't necessarily know the celestial dragon family that Ginny was owned by, but we do know that they often did employ, forced labor for all elements of their lives, including taking care of their children. It's entirely possible that Shamrock, despite being relatively an infant, might have had memories of her. I mean, it's not the weirdest thing in One Piece for somebody to have memories either before or after they necessarily should, so it's entirely possible that he might have also just remembered her from being an infant, developed some kind of obsession with the memory of a girl that he never knew. No matter which of these scenarios it is, it's not particularly comforting to think about. However, if either one of these does turn out to be true, it is very likely that we might see, Ginny get to meet up with an actually caring member of her biological family in the form of Shanks. This isn't an impossibility, given that the manga is currently in Elbaf. Shanks was last seen on Elbaf, and while I don't think that meeting is actually going to occur there, we are very close to that meeting potentially happening. The idea that Shanks has a little sister might also be considered having been teased with Film Red. Technically, Uda's a daughter, not a little sister, but there is the element of Shanks having a younger relationship to another child that he would essentially help take care of. Now, in the case of, usually that's viewed as Luffy, but in this case, it would be a girl, and yeah, Bonnie's about the right fit for that. It also might be nice if we ever get to see if they actually manage to bring Kuma back, because there's that interesting relationship of the family that you choose and the family you're born with, which is definitely also technically present within Shanks' story. I mean, you look at the Roger Pirates and then you look at the Red Hair Pirates. So there's full on an element to that could be fantastic to see, you know, play out, especially if it ends up being Shamrock, because I think Shamrock's going to be more involved in the fighting, but Figurling Garling probably will be too. Also, as a quick notation, did anybody happen to notice the fact that Bonnie and Kuma's story is essentially just, you know, Forrest Gump, at least the last part of the film, and technically a whole chapter set of the book? Like, you know, in that Forrest is left with his son and the mother dies and he essentially has to raise the son on his own, and now we just, you know, have Ginny and Kuma in the role of parents, and then we, you know, have Bonnie as the daughter, and the woman in Forrest Gump is also named Jimmy. Just, you know, something to think about. And while you're thinking about it, why not like and subscribe to the channel, because we got more videos about One Piece coming out. But this also does potentially lead into what, you know, Bonnie's future of the story might be, and I think it's pretty fair to say that Oda would not have gone to the lengths he did to give her such an impressive and detailed backstory alongside Kuma to merely just dump them after Egghead. I don't think that's going to happen at all. Much is going to happen by the end of the series, and even as somebody who's up to date with the manga, it's hard to predict exactly where it's going to go. But as I have said before in this video specifically, it's quite clear that Bonnie has the potential to be an asset to the Straw Hats to level them up to the power level they need to be. Right now, even in the manga, the Straw Hats, to be honest, are underperforming quite badly. And because of that, you know, with the exception of the Monster Trio, who usually do pull it out, everybody else needs more. And, you know, Bonnie might be the key to that. It could also be somewhat fair to say that with her ability to swap ages and stuff, it could be incredibly important to bringing Kuma back online, and I do think Kuma could play a significant role in the end of the series, especially alongside the other Revolutionary Army members. But also, given his connection to the Straw Hats, it makes a lot of sense that he will appear with, frankly, all the other members of the Straw Hat Grand Fleet to try and save the day. What do you think? Was there anything about Bonnie or Kuma's backstories that I missed? And is there any theories that you have that you want to leave down in the comments? And subscribe to the channel to see more videos, and like the video if you did.